And recapping our top story now, Mayor Rob Ford is fighting back against the CBC. It claims that he launched into a tirade laced with profanities when he called 911 following an ambush.
Put yourself in my shoes, and then I'm calling the police. I support the police 100%.
Ford says what the CBC did was inappropriate. It all came about after a CBC comedy crew ambushed him at his home. The mayor says he's not asking for an apology, but he'll take one. Oh, something tells me Ezra Levant of The Source is going to have more to say about this. Let's listen to what Ezra's got on this one.
The CBC doubles down in its war against Toronto Mayor Rob Ford, trying to change the subject from their disastrous home invasion this week. But are they lying again? Tonight on The Source. The CBC is spinning out of control. They're obviously under pressure, they're in a crisis, and they're not managing it very well. For 5 years, a Liberal member of Parliament named James Moore, all right, technically, he calls himself a Conservative, but we prefer accuracy here. A Liberal MP named James Moore has gorged the CBC on taxpayers' money. Every year he keeps giving them more. The rest of us in Canada were in a recession. The rest of us, the 99%, had cutbacks, but not the 1% in the CBC. They were partying up a storm over there, courtesy of taxpayers, because of James Moore's profligacy. No wonder. Take a look at this.
We've increased funding for the CBC in every single one of our budgets at a time of deficits and recessions globally and across the country.
Wow. Yeah. They're having a party while we're in deficits. No wonder James Moore refuses to come on our show to talk about CBC funding, even though he promised to do so. James Moore has never kept that promise to come back to answer about the CBC, even though I have literally asked him on 5 times. Well, I don't think the CBC reports to James Moore anymore. I think he reports to the CBC, don't you? He's the CBC's voice at the cabinet table, don't you think? He takes orders from the CBC and does their bidding in the government, which is backwards. Anyways, where were we? Right, the CBC. It's panicking because after 5 years of James Moore-a-palooza, after 5 years of James Moore's annual corporate bailout for the CBC's Bernie Madoffs, the bacchanalia is over. Finally, the 99% of us, the severely normal Canadians, are asking questions about the way the top 1%, the CBC government elite, live. The CBC's $1.1 billion bailout might be trimmed to just $1 billion. After all, that could seriously jeopardize their ability to throw red carpet parties during the next Toronto Film Festival. The CBC last week finally admitted that their party this year cost them $250,000. Even the non-partisan Information Commissioner is on the hunt, saying the CBC routinely breaks the law by refusing to disclose how it spends the public money.
I said that I'm concerned with their guidelines, which I just became aware of in preparation for this committee meeting, and which seems to indicate that they would make a decision on the application of the exclusion under Section 68.1 on the face of the wording of the request itself. And if that's the case, and they do this without retrieving the records and without processing all the records and without applying appropriate severances under the legislation, then I'm seriously concerned.
Let me translate for you. That's the Information Commissioner saying the CBC is breaking the law. It's pretty stressful for the CBC these days. For the rest of us, that's called accountability. For the CBC, it's called unprecedented. They've never had to answer to anyone, especially James Moore. So now they're making unforced errors. Like this week, when they brought back an old warhorse named Mary Walsh. She used to be a comedian on the CBC's low-ratings show called This Hour Has 22 Minutes. It used to be funny when Rick Mercer was on it, but that's been a long time, and they've had it tough since then. They said goodbye to Walsh a few years ago, and she does spend her time doing the left-wing political circuit now, not comedy. But last week, for some reason, they literally flew her in from Newfoundland to Toronto for one last mission. The CBC brought Mary Walsh in for one last hurrah, to take a run at Toronto Mayor Rob Ford. The CBC hates him. They hate his politics. They hate how he looks. They hate that he's fat and right-wing and doesn't live in a fancy neighborhood like they do. So they brought Mary Walsh in from Newfoundland and sent her to his house in Toronto, unannounced, in an unmarked car, not a CBC van, to shout at him and to block him from getting into his car. Take a look at this clip that's called Comedy.
One good thing about being stubborn, though, Mayor Ford, is you always know what you're going to be thinking the next day. God love you. Take care of yourself now. Didn't go that good, did it? I only came up to say, put the plug in the jug, keep the muzzle undug, and for God's sake, take the cotton wool out of his ears and put it in his mouth.
So they flew her in from Newfoundland for that. Can we watch the clip one more time with the CBC's laugh track removed? It shows you just how unfunny this was.
One good thing about being stubborn, though, Mayor Ford, is you always know what you're going to be thinking the next day. Good, did it? I only came up to say, put the plug in the jug, keep the muzzle undug, and for God's sake, take the cotton wool out of his ears and put it in his mouth.
Utterly unfunny. Frankly, the most amazing thing is how restrained Rob Ford was. I mean, here's a strange woman shouting at him, touching him, blocking him, crowding him. He just keeps asking to be let through on his own property, to be let through by a trespasser. It was astounding. What's even more astounding is that the CBC actually put that clip on TV anyways, adding a laugh track to make up for the lack of laughs. It still didn't work. It backfired on the CBC big time, precisely when the CBC was before Parliament, begging for another bailout from a government that is allied with Rob Ford. What a disaster. Even this guy, Nelson Wiseman, a far-left professor, said that Rob Ford came across looking like he was the one being bullied. He thought that was a PR victory for Rob Ford. Even Adam Vaughan, a left-wing alderman who hates Rob Ford, said the CBC crossed the line by trespassing on his private property. Good heavens, if the CBC stunt backfired so badly that even hardcore leftists are sympathizing with the mayor, the CBC's in big trouble. So the CBC's campaign war room against Conservatives went into overdrive. Here was someone near the top of their enemies list, Rob Ford, a right-wing mayor in their city, and they had succeeded in making him look good. And the CBC looked like a bunch of bullies bullying him on his own home. So the CBC went nuclear. They had to destroy Mayor Ford no matter what. So the unionized government bureaucrats at the CBC spoke with the unionized government bureaucrats at the Toronto Police Service, who were mad at Mayor Ford because he cut their budget back by 4%. And so the union brothers at the police claim that when the mayor called the cops, called 911 about this angry moose on his front lawn, that the mayor misbehaved. Here's what the CBC said on their show today.
What we've learned is that he waited a few minutes. They weren't there yet. He called back, demanded to know where they were, and in the ensuing conversation with the 911 dispatchers, according to several police sources, Ford turned on them and started hurling a whole string of obscenities.
Well, according to those police dispatchers, exactly what did Rob Ford say?
Well, I'm going to have to watch my language, but they've gone to their union and they have complained that Toronto's Mayor Rob Ford started yelling at them, the female call takers, calling them a bunch of, and they uses the B word, okay, and then says, "Don't you effing know, I'm Rob Ford, the effing mayor of this city."
Now, the CBC doesn't have the tape of the mayor calling 911. They don't have the transcript. But so what? It's not journalism. This is war. And the CBC ran with the gossip. They claimed, you saw it there, that the mayor called the 911 dispatchers bitches. They claimed that he called himself Rob effing Ford, the effing mayor. The CBC turned their own home invasion disgrace, they turned it around into a smear of the Conservative mayor. They did it. They salvaged it. They turned the story around. Except that when our Sun reporters called up our police sources in Toronto, they deny the story. Our police sources say that the mayor did indeed call the cops, and he called them back again when they hadn't shown up after 10 minutes. But he didn't call anybody bitches. He didn't call them names. And today, the mayor, Rob Ford, put out a statement. He said he did indeed say the F word out of frustration with the home invasion, but that it wasn't name-calling. He didn't call anyone names. He didn't swear at anyone. And he certainly didn't call the 911 operators names. He denies calling anyone bitches. So who is telling the truth here? Well, it's pretty easy to find out. Let's just hear the audio tape of the 911 call. I mean, I don't know the mayor. He managed to keep a civil tongue in his head when Mary Walsh from the CBC was badgering him on the driveway when she was pushing him and blocking him. He didn't hit her. He didn't shout at her. He didn't call her a bitch. He just politely asked her to move. She didn't. She was a trespasser and an assaulter. The mayor was polite, and then he left his own property, left his own driveway to go in his house to get out of the situation. So maybe he swore at the 9/11 operators. Maybe he did. Maybe he called them bitches. I don't know. Maybe. I wasn't there. Or maybe this is yet another CBC lie. It wouldn't be the first here. In fact, it would be the third. The first lie was told by the CBC's producer who set up the ambush. His name is Michael Donovan. When things started going sideways on this story, Donovan said that the problem here was Mayor Ford, that he just wasn't funny enough. He was a bit of a coward about things. Donovan actually told reporters that Mayor Ford hid behind the bushes. Really? Now, you saw the CBC video ambush clip. I didn't see the mayor hiding behind the bushes. I bet the CBC would have shown the mayor hiding behind bushes. It would have happened. That would have been great TV. They had the TV cameras there. They didn't show it. I don't think it happened. I think that Michael Donovan and the CBC is lying, trying to make Ford look like a bad guy, like a coward, to shift attention away from their home invasion. The next lie that the CBC's Donovan told was that the CBC tried to ask the mayor questions at work, but only went to his house as a last resort. Here's exactly what Donovan said. He said, quote, almost always we try to set up something more formal and more staged, but if that doesn't work, well, sometimes we'll stage an ambush. And look, I know why Donovan would have said that, because it would have been against the CBC's ethics code to do otherwise. Here's what the ethics code says. I wonder if Donovan has even read it. Let's read it together. We generally respect a person's refusal to be interviewed. However, in the public interest, we may choose to disregard the refusal, especially in investigative reporting or when a person plays a key role in an event of public interest. A decision to confront a person who has refused an interview will be discussed in advance with senior editorial management. We will resort to this form of interview in the public interest, not simply for stylistic effect, but actually Mary Walsh called the truth here as she admitted to our reporter, Joe Warmington, Donovan was lying about trying to talk to Mayor Ford at City Hall. First, here's Mary Walsh in her own words. Listen to this audio clip.
So you couldn't track him, so you decided to, take it right to his house, and like you did try to get him at City Hall, and you couldn't get him there?
Oh, sorry. No, I don't mean to imply that. Let's just be very careful. We went to City Hall after to try to talk to him again.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we talked to Doug Ford.
So lie number one was that the mayor hid in the bushes. That's the first CBC lie. Lie number two was that the CBC tried him first at City Hall, couldn't get to him, and only went to his home as a last resort. Mary Walsh herself proves that that's a lie. And now we're being told by the CBC that we shouldn't focus on their home invasion at all. No, don't pay attention to that. We shouldn't focus on their hiring a hardcore left-wing activist so unfunny. She hasn't been on the show in years, but they flew her in from Newfoundland to Toronto for one last left-wing mission. We shouldn't focus on that. Oh, no. We shouldn't focus on the trespass or the assault or just the plain unfunniness of it. We should focus on how the mayor spoke on the phone, calling 911, calling people bitches. Now, I think there are legitimate questions about that 911 call, like, why did it take so long to have police come to the mayor's house, especially since he's been the subject of death threats before? And why are police leaking private information about the mayor to the CBC just to get him when cops are obviously violating their duty in terms of privacy and professionalism? Those are real questions about the 911 call for another day. But my question for today is, what should happen to the CBC if this turns out to be lie number three, just like Donovan's other two lies? What if the mayor didn't actually call anyone a bitch, despite the CBC saying that he did? What if Heather Hiscox and Dave Seglins, who we saw earlier, went on TV to smear Rob Ford with a pack of lies? The CBC cooked up this whole story in the first place by trespassing on the mayor's property. They created a stunt, a news incident. Isn't it clear that this was a Hail Mary pass just to change the subject from their own illegal behavior? Even if it turns out that the mayor did indeed swear on the phone to 9/11, even if he called them bitches, that does not excuse the CBC's misconduct here. Now, what if I'm wrong? I'm sure we'll hear those tapes soon enough, or maybe even later today. What if it's just one more CBC lie, one more tax-funded CBC lie, like they're lies about us here at Quebec, or like they're lies about our company. The CBC has an enemies list. Stephen Harper is on it, Rob Ford is on it, we're on it, our boss Pierre-Carl Pelledeau's on it. James Moore is not on it because he has been the CBC's sugar daddy for 5 years. The CBC's running a political war room targeting Rob Ford and other Conservatives for destruction. That is why they brought in an unfunny political hack like Mary Walsh to do a smear job. It backfired. And now CBC bosses Michael Donovan and Heather Hiscox and Dave Seglins are piling on. I want that tape. I want that audio tape. I want to know who is lying. If Mayor Ford is lying, he might face a political price. Maybe. That's up to voters. Yeah, whatever. But what if the CBC is lying? Then that's our problem. That's my problem. That's your problem, because you and I are paying for these CBC liars. They are demanding another $1.1 billion bailout this year while crapping on their political enemies. You know, I wouldn't care if this was a stupid stunt by CTV or a Global TV, if it was some of their vendettas. Who cares? They're private companies using their own monies. That's their funeral. I mean, if they fly in some unfunny hack, that's their problem. But this war against Mayor Rob Ford is being paid for using bailout money that the CBC gets from you and from me as taxpayers. If there were ever proof of why the CBC needed to be cut off from the public trough, it's their misconduct during this past disgraceful week.